You're watching Mind Your Own Business with Jonathan Dawson.
Hello and welcome back to Mind Your Own Business here on CBT News. I'm Jonathan Dawson. I'm so excited to talk to you about this topic today because it is near and dear to my heart. It is one of my favorite topics of all time to talk about, and I'm very excited to announce that I have more and more dealers asking me about how to implement this strategy at their store. The strategy I'm talking about is one of my favorite subjects, and it's called Mission 22. Now, if you followed my work for a while, you probably are at least somewhat aware of this. Hopefully you are. But if you're being introduced to Mission 22 for the very first time, I'm so excited for you because this will be something that I believe once you start thinking about it, it'll start to haunt you. It'll become one of those ideas that's like the movie Inception. It grows inside your mind and it won't stop. Like a virus, like a mind virus, it won't let you go. Mission 22 is a concept that over the past, I want to say 6 years or so, I have been actively developing with dealers. And I'm now able to say with full confidence and actually the receipts to prove it, I'm able to say that I've implemented Mission 22 all over the country at different sizes of stores and different markets with different brands, and it is effective. What is Mission 22? Let's take a look at it together. Mission 22 starts with a claim. Now this claim, as I often have to kind of warn you in advance when I say this, I say, look, this claim I'm about to make is so bold, it's so audacious, it's so direct and in your face that I want to warn you in advance that you may not like it and you may get mad at me when you hear it. But it is the foundational claim of Mission 22, and that is this: that until your store has a salesperson average of 22 cars per person per month, your sales floor is broken. Now, let that sit for a second. Until your sales floor has a store average of 22 cars per person per month, your sales floor is broken. When I initially say that, whether it's to an individual or to a room full of dealers, I can feel the air change. I can feel the mood shift in the room. And it usually creates two things: curiosity and defensiveness. And depending on the person, it goes in two different orders. You know, it's either defensive first, then curious, or curious first and then defensive. But if you feel at all either curious or defensive when you hear me say that your store is broken, unless you average 22 cars per person, if you hear that sentence and you get defensive, you're in the right room, my friend. Don't turn me off yet. You're just like everyone else. And if you're curious right now and you're like, hey, that sounds interesting to me, tell me more, hang on, my friend. It's about to get worse and better at the same time. Let's take a look at the math on where Mission 22 comes from. So the Mission 22 philosophy that I help dealers implement is a philosophy that moves them towards and eventually helps them achieve a store average where the store average now is 22 cars per person, which means if you have a team of 10 people, you're selling 220 cars. If you have a team of 5 people, you're selling 110 cars. So it's just a simple math equation. However many people on my sales floor times 22, that becomes the store average for my team. Now, like I said, when I first say this, your brain does a couple of things. How, and that's not possible, and I've never seen that before, and who does that, and how would that even work? And there's all kinds of questions that you'll have, and I'll be talking about some of them with you today. But what I want you to do is just allow the idea to just kind of hit you and marinate for a moment. What if it were true? Just hypothetically, what if it were true that your store averaged 22 cars per person? If that were actually true about your store. Because it is true about other stores. There are stores that are doing it, and I've been proving Mission 22 now for years, so I have the blueprint for you, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that today. But if it were true about your store, what would that mean practically? Can you imagine? Can you even imagine it? I remember when I first shared Mission 22 with the COO of an auto group. They had 4 stores. And he said, John, could we do like Mission 11 first? Because I think we have like a 9-car average right now across our stores. Could we do Mission 13? Could we start at Mission 13, please? And he shared that with me because he was like, John, I don't even know how to imagine that. I even had one other GSM who said to me, he said, John, how's that even possible? I mean, I don't even know if that's possible because you're talking about something that, the national average, NADA national average for decades has been, 10 to 12 cars per person, across, depending on market and brand, but that's 10 to 12 cars. That's always been the average. It's always been. And here's my question back to them, and my question for you if you're having similar thoughts. is let's say that that's true. Let's admit that. Let's say that that's just math and that's true. That the average is in fact 10, 12, whatever, 11. That's the average. Well, the very nature of a mathematical average, the very nature of something being an average implies by mathematical necessity that if the average is this, then there's something above it and there's something below it. And that's the nature of an average. That's how averages work. And so I shared with a manager recently who was asking about Mission 22, and his store average was right at 11, a little over 11, 11.5 or something like that. And he's like, well, John, what you're saying is remarkable because, I've never seen that before and I've never heard of that before. And I said, let me ask you a question, my friend. Are you willing to start with the admission, because you're questioning the math and I understand that, but are you willing to start with the admission that by the very nature of your team being at an 11 store average right now, that you have an average team, that your store is average? Are you willing to admit that out loud? And he went, man, I don't want to say it, but I guess that's just the math. I said, yeah, that's right. That's the math. And some of you listening to, let's say your store is right now at 13 cars per person. Okay, well, fair enough. Depending on your brand, you're 1 unit above average. So your store is doing 1 car more than an average person would do. I don't know that that's something to be excited about. Look at the math. Do the math for your team and ask, where are you? Are you at 13 cars? Are you at 15? Heck, even if you're at 15, I think that's better than average. But that's not what's possible. That's just better than average. 22 cars. Where's the math come from? Well, the math comes from a very simple idea, and that is that the average scheduled work month for a sales professional in a car dealership, the average scheduled work month is 22 days per month. That is the average scheduled work month for a typical salesperson. So we're just playing the average. We're saying, okay, let's look at that. The average is 22 days per month. So that's the average number of work days. Now let's just ask a question. What if, it's something I'm sure you've thought before, what if they just sold a car a day? What if we could just get them to sell a car a day? What if we could just get them to be productive once a day, every day that they're there? Why not just do that? Well, my friend, I have the way to do that. I have the formula, if you will, and I've replicated it now so many times that with absolute certainty and no hesitation, I can tell you exactly how to get your store to Mission 22. It's actually very simple in its math. That doesn't make it easy in its application. Something can be simple that's not necessarily easy to do, right? It can be simple in that it's easy to understand, but it's not easy to implement because it requires change, and change is hard for people to do. But let's look at the math together. 22. If I wanted your team to sell 22 cars per person as a store average, there's a couple ways that you could mathematically get there, right? Let's just look at the raw math of the number. Well, obviously, what you could do is you could take your total volume per month, right? You could just say, here's how many cars we sell, and divide that by 22 units. And what that would give you is a number of salespeople that you would need to be at average of 22 if you sold that volume with that number of people. So for simple math, let's say that you sold 220 cars last month, and you currently did it with 20 salespeople. Well, according to Mission 22, you would need to have 10 salespeople to sell 220 cars, not 20. So your team is currently bloated by double. You have a whole 100% more human beings on the floor than you should if you kept the mathematical number, unit-wise, at 220, but you were selling it based on a 22-car average, you would be at 220 with 10 people instead of with 20 people. Now, if that math right now even remotely aligns with your store, if you can do the math and kind of see, I'm currently at 10 cars per person or 11, and in order to hit that same volume, I would essentially have to cut my team in half. Now let's just again kind of talk about some of the challenges that question even brings about. Right away, if you're thinking about the math on that, you're starting to ask questions about coverage. You're starting to ask questions about practicality of that, what that even look like. Where am I even going to find these people, that can sell 22 cars? Because maybe at your store, maybe right now you don't even have a single person selling 22 in your entire store. Or maybe you have one person who hits in the 20s, just one out of 7 or out of 10 or out of 15 people. And so you're going, how would that even make sense? Well, let's I'm going to show you, hang with me here, because this is all about philosophy first. But there's 3 things you actually need to have in place. 3 things you have to have in place to become a Mission 22 dealership. If you want to achieve a 22 car per person average, you need 3 things. Let me kind of walk you through what those 3 things are, okay? The first thing you actually need is a belief. a belief or a set of beliefs, if I may be more clear, a set of beliefs. The first thing that must be in place is a set of beliefs. Here's why. If you don't even believe it's possible, you will not even attempt it, right? You don't attempt things you don't even believe are possible. So the first belief is, do you believe it's possible? And for you right now watching, there's a good chance that I've lost half of you, that half the people watching this right now are going, nope, change the channel. Nope, scroll past. I don't even believe it's possible. And that's fair. For those of you who don't even believe, you can stop the video now, move on to other things in your life, click on a different one, no worries. But those of you who go, technically, yes, it would require some faith, and I still need to see more, but yes, I technically believe it's possible, conceptually, theoretically possible. Great, we'll start with that. Foundation belief number one, is it even possible? Belief number two, and this one's a little bit deeper. This is going to cut a little bit more. But this is the belief that my people deserve it, that my people deserve the dignity of a deal a day. Do you believe that your people who work on your sales floor, that they deserve the dignity of a deal a day? Do you believe that for your people? Do you believe that if they're going to give you 8, 9, 10 hours a day of their life away from their family and friends and the people they love most in the world, do you believe that they deserve to be productive in the form of profitable production, that they deserve to bring home a sale for that day? Do you believe that they deserve that? Because that's the second belief. Now, I have had a conversation with an owner who actually said to me, no, honestly, I don't. In fact, I don't want them to sell that many cars because then they're making too much money. And if they make too much money, they'll get high and mighty, and I'll be dealing with too many prima donnas. And so I'm not interested in having that many people successful like that. I'd rather have one or two, but I just don't think I or my management team want to manage that many successful salespeople on my sales floor. So he told me, point blank, I don't want that. I want people hungry and starving because then they're desperate and then they will do whatever I tell them to do. And that was his belief. Now, I can tell you personally, I disagreed with the person. I told him, I don't think that we're a good fit. He was reaching out to me because he heard about my success with another store in their market, and that's how he reached out. But once I told him my philosophies and he said no, I said, I think I'm not a good fit, and here's some other people you can call. But if you don't believe those two things, foundation belief number one, that it's possible, that it's even possible conceptually, and I know you need more, but let's start with that. Then number two, my people deserve it. And then number three, that I want it. The third thing is this. Do you believe as a leader, as a manager, as somebody running a team, do you believe that you want that for your people? Do you want to have a team of highly productive, highly profitable, consistently effective people on your team? Do you really want that? Do you actually want to have a team that's that way? Because if you don't really believe you want that, like the other dealer who said they didn't, then I just think we end the conversation. So it's that simple. So let's go through this. The first thing that you need is beliefs, a set of beliefs, that it's possible, that my people deserve it, and that I want it too. I'm willing to do what it takes. I want it to be my reality. That's the first thing. Once you have a set of beliefs, I told you there's three things that you need, beliefs being one of them. The next thing you need, my friend, is you need a blueprint. And not just you need a blueprint, but your people need a blueprint. They need a clear blueprint, a map, if you will, of what it takes to hit 22 cars. They need clarity of that process. They need to know what does it look like. And so that means you need a collective blueprint for the entire sales floor, that everybody needs to be on the same page of what we're building and why. And then the second thing is the individual people on your team need a clear blueprint for how they're going to create that. How are they going to make that a reality? I mean, it's one thing to talk in theory. It's one thing to say, wouldn't it be nice if? But okay, what does that even look like for me? So let's talk first corporate blueprint. What does it look like for you organizationally? And then let's talk micro blueprint. What does it look like for the individual people? And what do they need to have? Corporately, as a sales team, if you're going to build a Mission 22 team, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have a map. You have to say, okay, this is how we're going to get to this math. Now, the reality is, for most of you, this is true, 98% of you watching this, that part of getting to that math is trimming back the team. It is inevitable that it is likely to be the case that you have people on your team who just will not, because they either can't for some sort of capacity or desire, they will not be a 22 car person. They just won't. And so if they're going to always be a 9 or an 8 or a 7 or a 12, if that's what they're going to always be, and you choose to keep them, then you need to have people on the other end of that mathematical extreme so successful that they pull the store average up, even though you're allowing these 8 and 10 car people to still survive at your store. So if you're going to say, when you're looking at your math, if you're going to say, well, this person, because they've been here for so long, or because they were married to the owner's daughter, or because they're best friends with the GSM, they're allowed to underperform consistently, and that's okay with us, then you just need to do the math on that. Well, if they're going to stay on the team, then that means the rest of the people are going to have to pick up that lack of average, and they're going to have to excel beyond 22, because you can't have everybody else at 22 and them at 8 and the store be at 22. It's just mathematically not possible. So you need to isolate. If you have any sacred cows, put them down on paper and just say, these are the people that are exempt from the standard. These are the people that are exempt from the expectation. These are the people that we give permission to be unproductive while they're here, because they're here for 22 days. They sell 8 cars or 12 cars a month, or even 14 cars a month. So that means if they're here for 22 days, they sell 14. That means there's 8 days that right now out of 22, 8 out of 22, which is almost a full third, right? More than that. That we're letting them be unproductive a full third of the month, which means a full third of the year. They're unproductive, and we're okay with that. They're here for 8 to 10 hours a day, a third of the year, mathematically, more than that. And it's okay. They don't have to be productive. They can just be here and be unproductive for a third of their time, and that's okay. If you have sacred cows like that, put them down on paper. Do the math. But once you isolate for those people that you're willing to compromise your standards for, then you just go to the next category and say, okay, well, these are the people that we have that are currently under 22, which is going to be the majority of your team. And these are the people that are currently above 22, so we have them kind of off to the side right now. They already have that number. And then you start doing the math. In order for us to keep the exact same volume, for now, let's just do level 1. The volume will not change. Whatever you're selling now, you'll sell again. But in order for that to be the case, the map for your math has to be that we have to start letting go some of these underperforming, consistently ineffective people. And what will happen is you start trimming the team. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't do it tomorrow. You map it out so that it happens over a period of time. Maybe you give people a 2-month notice. Some stores give 3 months notice. Some stores give 1 month's notice. It depends on how quickly you want to get there. But if you want to say, hey, look, to the entire team, remember this is the corporate blueprint. To the corporate blueprint, you say, hey, to the entire team, listen, we're going to get to a place where we're at 22 cars per person. In order to achieve that, if we keep our numbers the same, we need to be at this number of salespeople instead of this number of salespeople. So what we're going to do for all of you is we're going to give you an expectation that over the next 3 months, this is the expectation of what you're going to have to do different so that you can meet the requirements that we have to stay on the team. Those of you who are unwilling or unable, or for whatever reason, do not achieve this, at the end of this 3-month grace period, that maybe it's 2 months, depends on you, at the end of this period, we're going to have to start letting go of some people. And we're going to let you go because you're not meeting the minimum standards that we have, and you're not doing the daily activities that we have. So you're not doing those things, so therefore you can't be on the team anymore. Now, what will happen gradually over time? Let's say you have a ramp-up period of 2 or 3 months. You tell everybody in advance, the corporate blueprint, here's the blueprint, here's what we're doing. By the time you get to that end, when you have that 2-month or that 3-month trial grace period is over, you have to let somebody go. Now, somebody may quit on the way to it, right? Somebody may not even make it to that point. They just quit because they don't like standards. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to actually have to do anything. So that's fine. They quit. Well, if they quit, then the rest of the team gets to pick up the slack a little bit. And what you end up doing, my friend, is this. You end up teaching people how to be productive on a regular basis. Here's the reality of most stores. This is just the actual math of most dealerships. When you have a bunch of people who are averaging 11 and 12 cars per person, what happens mathematically is if they're there for 22 days and they sell 11 cars, is they're selling a car on average every other day, which means they never get any real momentum behind them. Because the best time to sell a car is when you've just sold a car. And so if you are not even able to sell a car a day, you're never building the habits to be able to handle a 2-car day or a 3-car day because you have no momentum. And so you need to have these blueprints in place. And so for a corporate blueprint, you're going to have to build something like that. Now, obviously, I have examples, and if you want some blueprints from me directly, if you want to actually talk to some Mission 22 dealers, just send me an email. In the subject line, you just put Mission 22. send an email to me. You can send it to my company email, which is just, you send it to my personal email. Just send it to john@cellchology.com. Jon@cellchology.com, SELLCHOLOGY. Should be on the screen probably, but Jon@cellchology.com. Just send it, just put Mission 22 in the subject line. And I can actually connect you with dealers, but you need to have a corporate blueprint. Then you need to have an individual blueprint for each person, which means tailored to the individual people, whether they've been in the business for 3 weeks or 30 years, you're gonna have to create an individual blueprint for each person of what does that look like for them to get to 22. What is gonna be their math, their math. They gotta have a map for the math. They gotta know what specific things is their business gonna have to change, what are they gonna have to do to get there? And that individual blueprint for them gives us our third variable. Remember, there's 3. You have to have a set of beliefs, you have to have blueprints for everybody, and then the third piece is you have to have daily behaviors. The daily behaviors are the things you're gonna monitor and measure, and you're gonna track. This is the stuff that you have to look at on a regular basis, both daily and weekly with your team, and they have to know and individually track themselves. They have to develop new behaviors because you don't get new outcomes with the same behaviors. You don't create new outcomes with the same beliefs. You need to change beliefs and change behaviors, and then you change the outcomes, right? You know that. So we need to have new behaviors. Well, some of those behaviors are going to be tailored to the individual person. That's why each person will have their own blueprint for how to get there. And once again, if you want, just send me an email and I'll go over this with you or send you examples so you can see what that looks like, what things you should track. But you're going to have your team have new behaviors. There's going to be a certain accountability in place because the behaviors of a person who sells 22 cars per person as a monthly average, that person who does that has different daily habits and behaviors than the person who's selling 8. That's obvious. And as your team gets a little bit smaller, what happens is the pressure and the expectation for each individual person increases. Why? Because there's now more accountability for them to achieve their individual portion of the whole. Because there's less people coming every single month. There's less people coming to the pie, so you now have to handle more of the pie. You're responsible for a bigger slice. And as that happens gradually over time, you can actually get to a store that has a 22 per person average. Now, the fastest I've ever seen and done it with any dealer is 6 months. It's the fastest. You could say, John, I want to break that record, and I would work with you to do that. But most stores, it takes longer than 6 months, but that's only because most stores have sacred cows. Most stores have people they won't touch, people that won't hold people accountable. If the people complain too much, you give in to their complaints because you operate from scarcity or fear. You're afraid to lose people instead of saying, I don't need people who won't do their job. And that's why you're stuck at a level that's probably closer to average. And it's okay if that's what you want, but I'm passionate about teaching people how to build a business that'll one day work as hard for them as they worked for it. And so because of that being my passion, I want your people to be successful every single day they walk into the dealership. I want you to give them the dignity of a deal a day. And that's what Mission 22 is. So if you are inclined and you are a kind of dealer or manager who says, John, you've got me on the beliefs, I think I have an idea for a blueprint, I just need to do those behaviors, send me an email and let's talk about it. And I'll be happy to map that out for you and show you what it could look like. But I just want you all to realize if you're going to mind your own business, one of the things to pay attention to is, are my people productive every day they walk in the door? They're in a production-based role. They're in an income-producing role. Are they producing for the time they're there? And if they're not, I challenge you to get on Mission 22 and develop a culture and an environment where people thrive instead of just survive. And that, my friends, will change your business. Thanks.
This has been Mind Your Own Business with Jonathan Dawson.